Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo apurai kanu apurai kaitnut neye AKANFO NANASOM da medinde ojirapo kwesi ranem pata akan akwamu mai maruka etifi mu ojirapo ojiramai mu. Greetings to all apurai kani apurai kaitnut people, meaning African black people. Today is AKANFO NANASOM Day, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Ra Nehem Pata Akan, Ojirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Within Ojiramai, the purified nation, Apurakani Apurai Kaitni, people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say once again for tuning into the broadcast. We're opening up the chat room. If you have any questions or comments, you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. For those who are new to our broadcasts, we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have AKANFO NANASOM, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion, on Joda, on Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of ancestral religion, first and foremost because we are Akan, secondly because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akan culture, Akan ancestral religious practice, Akan cosmology, and so forth, not only from individuals in the Western Hemisphere, but also those individuals on the continent of Apuraikai who have been infected with Christianity, Islam, white culture in general, pseudo-educational endeavors and so forth, infecting their presentation of ancestral religion, and therefore their presentation manifests that infection. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion, which is rooted in our ancestral origins in ancient Kanat, the Kan land, which is the title of ancient Nubia. Our origins, some of our people migrated from ancient Kanat as well as Kamit, but ancient Kanat to the western part of the continent of Apuraikai a couple of thousand years ago, reestablished the Kanat Empire after the fall of Kamit, the Empire of Ghana in that region. 1,000 years after that, because of Muslim invasions, some of our people migrated further south, reestablished Akana or Akan civilization in the savanna and forest belt regions of contemporary Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana today. Hundreds of years after that, some of our people were taken from those regions and forced into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kessier, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. And this is how we ended up in the Western Hemisphere. However, we maintained our ancestral religious traditions in our blood circles in the Western Hemisphere. Thus, the Akan tradition is called Huinti in Suriname and South America, from the Akan term Huinti. In Jamaica, the Akan tradition is called Obia, from the Akan term Obai. North America, in the United States, the Akan tradition is called Hoodoo, from the Akan term Undu, which means medicine from roots, trees, plant life, from which we get root work. It also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication. We also call the tradition conjure, from the Akan term kanche, which means to utter incantations to bring forward the spirits of the Abosom and Nananom and Samanfo, the deities, and our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. We maintained our ancestral religious traditions in our blood circles. We were thus empowered and guided by our Nananom and Samanfo and the Abosom, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circles, and the Abosom, the forces in nature. They guided us and empowered us on the best means by which to wage war against the whites and their offspring and force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. We took up metal armaments to wage war against the whites and their offspring. We were directed towards chemical and biological warfare, which we established the precedent for in the Western Hemisphere through being guided by the Nsamanfo, the Nananoma Nsamanfo, and the Abosom towards specific plant life, mineral life, and so forth to deal with root work, to wage chemical and biological warfare against our enemies in concert with raising up metal armaments to wage physical warfare against our enemies. So this is what we deal with on AKANFO NANASOM, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion, which we're going to get into some detail, of course, tonight. On Abenada Tuesday nights, we have Ojida, which means purification, where we deal with the ancestral religion in general, not just the Akan expression, but Afurakani, or African ancestral religion, which we call Nanasom in general, no matter what form it takes, no matter where we exist in the world. We show how it impacts every aspect of our lives. Ancestral religion, or Nanasom, in essence, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. We state that Ojira, purification, operationalizes Nanasom. Purification, Ojira, operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions. We seek to align every thought, every intention, and every action with divine order every moment of every day. That is our ancestral culture. It is the divine acceptance, the divine law or love of order, and the divine rejection, divine hatred of disorder and its purveyor. So in order to execute our function in creation harmoniously, as we are designed to execute that function within creation by the Supreme Being, the Great Mother Nyamewa, and the Great Father Nyame, the Supreme Being, we seek to execute that function and align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. When we make legitimate mistakes, then we engage the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion, the ritual process to incorporate law and restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions so we can get back on track with executing our function in creation and maintaining divine order. So this is how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives as we seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. So on the Ojira broadcast, we purify, Ojira meaning purification, purifying the understanding, concepts, the nature of the deities, the Abosom, the nature of the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, the nature of the Great Mother, the Supreme Being, Great Father, Great Mother and Great Father who comprise the Supreme Being, the Creator and Creatress, who are grandchildren of the Supreme Being, and so forth, various different things. On our Egua Marketplace Day broadcast on Awukuda Akoda Wednesday night, we showcase Afurakani businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who are serving the community in a positive capacity, those who are informed by and maintain their ancestral religious practices and their values in the context of that service to the community. We have showcased a number of businesses, organizations, and institutions. We also deal with the philosophical foundation of economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values and a holistic approach to economic development, and we have thus published our Okom economic development model, which is a model, of course, rooted in our ancestral religious values, and you can download that model. It's a holistic approach to economic development, and that is key to Ama ancestry, key to nation building. We also have on our Yada Thursday night broadcast, Ama Sim Affairs of the Nation, where we deal with specific issues that are confronting us as an Oman, as a nation, specifically Ojira Mine, the purified Ojira Oman nation, mine in the land of the West, the land of the setting sun. Ojira Mine is the purified nation, Afro-Akani people in the Western Hemisphere. Because we have been directed, since we were forced to migrate here, we were directed by our Nananom Nsamanfo, our Egungun Kuvito, our ancestresses and ancestors, to coalesce in a specific region of this western portion of the Earth Mother's body, coalesce and blend ancestral blood circles, take in the plant life, animal life, mineral life of this region of the Earth Mother's body for not only food but also medicine, interface with the Earth Mother divinities in their unique expression in this region of the Earth Mother's body, interface with the unique expression of the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou as they manifest in this region of the Earth Mother's body. This confluence of events causes us to forge a locative identity as we reincarnate and reborn through these blood circles within which we have coalesced and blended ancestral blood circles and brought ancestresses and ancestors back in this region of the Earth Mother's body with these unique expressions of the Abosom and plant life, animal life, and mineral life. We've forged a unique locative identity, and therefore we have a unique approach to ancestral religious practice, born of our experience, a unique approach based on the fact that when we were forced to migrate away from the continent over 300 years ago, the manner in which we practice ancestral religion at that point was fossilized in our bones and blood and carried with us, and that it is that pristine tradition that we passed on once we arrived here intergenerationally and transcarnation. And then once interfacing with this region of the Earth Mother, then we forge that locative identity. And we have a unique approach to ancestral religious practice, a unique approach to ancestral culture, a unique approach to solving our issues, our problems as Ojirama, the purified nation. And we deal with Amaniye nationism, which is the purification of nationalism. A proper understanding of what nation building is, rooted in the reality that the Oman, the nation, is a living, breathing entity governed by specific Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, and so forth. We are cells within that organal structure. So as we interface with one another to execute our functions interdependently as cells, we also serve that greater entity, the Oman, the nation, which we are a component part of and governed by the deities that regulate order within that organal structure. We have a unique, holistic understanding of what an Oman, an entity, a nation is. So we deal with nationism, the purification of nationalism. That's what we deal with on that broadcast, Amai and Sim Affairs of the Nation. So tonight, our subject is dealing with the deity, the Abosom, Sepa, 42 Nomes, 42 nerves, 42 assessors of Maat, and 42 days in the Akan calendar. Now, people have heard of, in Ancient Kamit, when you look at the structure of the culture, look at the structure of the society, you'll see there are 42 administrative divisions in Ancient Kamit. Similar, and of course, the whites and offspring patterned this culture after the culture of Ancient Kamit, not only through the idiocy of masonry and so forth, when they're taking bits and pieces, fragments that they really do not understand and are incapable racially and spiritually of understanding, and trying to paste these things together to manufacture some appearance of some relation to Ancient Kamit in their empty pseudo-rituals and so forth, as well as the structures of their buildings and so forth, imitating the temples of Ancient Kamit. So you see the federal building in Washington, D.C. and around the country after the order of the temples of Ancient Kamit, the Tekken and so forth, which is the Washington Monument. All these different things are imitations of our culture. They also imitated the structure. So we had 42 administrative divisions akin to 42 states with 42 different capitals, very similar to the 50 states in the United States, and each state has its own capital. Just like Illinois is a state, the capital of the state is Springfield and so forth. 50 states, 50 administrative divisions or districts. Each one of the 50 states has its own capital. However, in addition to that, you have the federal capital. You have Washington, D.C. D.C. stands for the District of Columbia. They set aside a specific space to have what is called a federal city. They didn't want the capital of the United States to be the capital of a state. They wanted it to be a separate entity. This is why it's not called a state. It's the District of Columbia, and it's separate from the other states, so to speak. It is a quote-unquote federal city, and it's the capital for the entire country. And in that sense, the country itself is like a great quote-unquote state with Washington, D.C. as the capital. So you have 50 states with 50 capitals, but in addition to that, you have the capital or federal city. This is an imitation of what we have in Ancient Kamit. You have the 42 administrative divisions, which the whites and offspring call Nomes, we call Sepat. But the 42 administrative divisions, each one has a capital. But in addition to those 42, you have another piece, which is the capital that makes it 43, capital of the entire country. That capital throughout, that enduring capital throughout the dynastic period was Menefa, which is misrepresented as Memphis in the Greek language and so forth, but Menefer, men means stable, permanent, and abiding, and Nefer means beautiful. And of course, men means the same thing in Akan, and Nefer or Efer means beautiful, and Fefer means beautiful in Akan as well. So that's stable, permanent, and abiding, men, Nefer, beautiful, excellent place. This is the title of the capital of Kamit during the dynastic period. So you have the 42 administrative divisions, then the 43rd piece is the capital. Now, the whites and their offspring call these 42 nomes, 42 administrative divisions. What we are showing here, which is very key, is what is the relationship between these 42 divisions, what are their functions, and their relationship to the 42 Assessors of Maat, the 42 deities, and of course in the Akan calendar, we have a 42-day sacred calendar, which continuously perpetuates itself. Now, when you look at administrative divisions, on the structure of the landmass itself, we are a microcosm of that macrocosm. As we talked about with our AKRADINBOSOM series, the 11 divinities that regulate all natural cycles in creation, they also have, we did a broadcast last week talking about the 11 major body systems and the 11 deities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, which govern the 7-day week, these male and female divinities. They each govern a major body system, one of the 11 major body systems. In the same fashion, when you look at the 42 quote-unquote nomes or administrative divisions, what you have in the microcosm are the 42 pairs of nerves with the extra 43rd pair. It's the same structure. In your body, you have the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system. If you look at just the basic, what the nervous system is, it coordinates its actions by transmitting signals to and from different parts of its body. That's the nervous system. It detects environmental changes that impact the body, then works in tandem with the endocrine system to respond to such events. Now, this is key. That's just a basic definition. The nervous system is a part of an animal or human being that coordinates its actions by transmitting signals, and we're talking about electric signals throughout the system, from the brain throughout the system, transmitting signals to and from different parts of its body. The nervous system detects environmental changes that impact the body, then works in tandem with the endocrine system to respond to such events. The endocrine system, of course, is the system of glands that secrete hormones into the bloodstream for directives of action. Now, if you look at a nation and its administrative divisions, you're looking at the same thing. You have administrative divisions. They coordinate their actions to sustain the integrity of the nation, sending signals to different parts of the country or different parts of the body. When it says the nervous system detects environmental changes that impact the body, the different divisions of the nation detect environmental changes, not just natural disasters and so forth, but invasions from other countries and so forth. These are environmental changes that could impact the body. Then the nervous system works in tandem with the endocrine system to respond to such events. So you have that nervous system structure that responds to these different events, environmental changes that would impact the body of the nation, the body politic, and so forth. And then you work with the government, you work with the structures within society, the institutions within society. So you have the governmental structures, which are akin to the nervous system. And then you have the institutions within society, educational institutions, training institutions, agricultural institutions, all the various institutions within society that are akin to the endocrine system that secretes hormones and directives into the quote-unquote bloodstream of the lifeblood of the nation for directives for action. But then the nervous system also sends those electric signals. So you have chemical signals sent by the endocrine system and electric signals sent by the nervous system. The nervous system is permeating the entire body of the person, the being, but also the body politic of the nation. So this is what we're dealing with. 42 Nomes plus that 43rd district dealing with the capital. So it's 43 administrative districts. You have 43 pairs of nerves that make up the system. So when you look at the peripheral nervous system, you have 43 pairs of nerves. You have the 12 cranial nerves, and then you have the 31 nerves from the cervical vertebrae and the thoracic nerves and the lumbar and so forth, and the sacral and the coccygeal. You have those all together, 31 pairs there, and then you have the 12 pairs in the cranium. Now, what we want to talk about is the divinity, the deity, Sepa, and the relationship of Sepa to the nerves, the relationship of Sepa to the body, the relationship of Sepa to the nation, his relationship to the Assessors of Maat. Now, the whites and their offspring called the 42 administrative districts Nomes. That's Greek. We call them the Sepat, in plural Sepatu, Sepayu, and sometimes Sepatu, and so forth. So why are they called Sepatu, and what is the relationship? If you look at the definition of the term Sepa, it has a number of different, of course it means nome or administrative district, but the root Sep also means a time or a season, an occasion. It also means a case at law, affair, and act, and so forth. So, for example, Sep, Tepi. Tepi means first or beginning, and Sep means time or occasion. So the first time or the first occasion, talking about the beginning of creation, the first occasion, the first time period, the first season. But Sep, so Sep meaning season or occasion or condition, but it also means case or situation. Sep or Sepat can also mean judgment. So you have these 42 different conditions, 42 different occasions, 42 different centers of judgment, centers of time or seasons, talking about regulating order. That's Sep or Sepat. But then there's the deity whose name is Sepat. And when you look at the name of the deity Sepat, who is this deity Sepat? First, if you look at the image that we use for the show, we show an image of the deity Sepa. We show the right side up of the country of Kamit with the south at the top and the north at the bottom. Show a satellite image, we show a map and so forth, and we show that same structure. You see the delta region that fans out at the bottom, which is the north. You see the sacral region, where the sacral nerves are, and so forth, that fans out at the bottom. And you also see, of course, the spine, and you see the 42 administrative divisions, plus the capital. Then you see next to that picture of the human body with the 43 pairs of nerves, you see the Medutu for the name of the deity, Sepa, the symbol for the S, the symbol for the P, the bird, and the two different birds for Pa. But then you see the determinative symbol of the centipede. And then we show an actual image of a centipede. And we see the perpendicular orientation of the centipede. What you'll see is a replication of the 43 pairs of nerves. You see the central portion of the body and then the legs sticking out of the centipede and so forth. Of course, it's an exact replication of that structure within our bodies. They call Sepa the centipede deity. He has a specific function. So what is the function of Sepa? If you look in the Runu Pert Imheru, the so-called Book of the Dead, they'll talk about Sepa, the Centipede Divinity. And centipedes are venomous, by the way, so they can attack other parasitic type insects and destroy them, but they also follow earthworms and they help with the fertility of the soil as well. So they are protectors, but then they also have to do with the nourishment and fertility. That's a direct relationship to protecting or defending the land. That's what you're dealing with these administrative divisions and so forth, like the, dealing with the nervous system, and then the fertility, operating in harmony with the endocrine system, the institutions within the land, the structure, and so forth. Sepa is seen as and shown and functions as a protector of the body of Alsar. When Alsar is mummified by Anpu, he's embalmed and mummified by Anpu, his body is preserved and so forth, then Anpu sets 7 deities over the protection of the body of Alsar. These 7 deities operate under the direction of the deity Sepa. Sepa governing that, as you can see, the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, the peripheral nervous system, coordinating functions, protecting from outside environmental changes, and also strengthening those internal changes as well, and coordinating activities throughout the body. So you have Anpu first embalming Alsar, making him impervious to decay and so forth, and then setting 7 deities over the protection of the body that's related to those 7 Karakaru, or so-called chakra centers, protecting the body of the purified, mummified, crystallized, purified body of the entity. Sepa is governing that. Sepa, the quote-unquote peripheral nervous system, is regulating and protecting, and is the master of those 7 divinities that govern the body. So when you look in the Urunu Pert Imheru, when you look at the text, if you look in chapter 17, then it's explained in the text. So we're not going to go through the whole chapter 17. But if you look in the Papyrus of Ani, for example, chapter 17, we're going to go through a portion of it because that's one of the longest chapters in the Runu Pertinent Heru, so we don't need to go through all of that. Just the section dealing with Sepa, and the way it's structured is they make a statement and then they explain the statement. So first we'll read through the statement and then the explanation will get into that. So this particular section, it says, who then is this? And it says, Moste, Hap, Dwamutef, Kepsunuef. Those 4 are the 4 children of Heru, for example, by the way. So Moste, Hap, Dwamutef, Kepsunuef. Homage to you, masters of Ma'at, right and true, divine beings who are behind Alsar, causing to be annihilated defects, who are in the following of the female divinity Hetet Seku. Grant that I may come before you. This is what the deceased spirit is saying to these different deities. Yet said homage to them, anchia heraku to them, identify who they are. They're the ones who annihilate defects in the following of the goddess, the Ntoro Hetep Sekus. Then the deceased person says, grant to me that I may come before you. Destroy the defects for me, all of the defects that have been attached to me according to that destruction that you wrought for the illuminated beings, the 7 illuminated beings, those who are among the followers of their master, the god Sepa. Anpu is the one who made their place on the day of Ma'ai Adek An. Then the question is asked in the text, what then is this? They ask the question, okay, you just said that, well, what is this? Then the explanation comes. The lords and writers, the masters of right and truth, or the masters of Ma'at, Neb Ma'at, as it said in the early portion of the text, is Tuhuti and Astes, Neb Amentet, the master of Amentet. The divine beings mentioned early in the text, behind Alsar, Moste, Hap, Dwamutef, and Ketsunwef, are those who are behind the great thigh in the northern heaven. That's talking about a constellation within the northern heaven. Those who cause annihilation of defects and who are in the following of the goddess Hetep Sekus, as mentioned earlier in the text, is Sebek, who is within the waters, the great crocodile divinity within the waters. Now, Hetep Sekus, the goddess mentioned earlier in the text, she is the Ma'arit Ra, or the Eye of Ra. Otherwise said, the Neseret, she is, or the flame following Alsar to burn up the spirits of his enemies. As concerning the defects, all which belong to Alsar, the scribe of the offerings of the deities Ani, since he went forth from the womb of his mother, as concerning the illuminated beings, the 7 illuminated beings, they are Moste, Hapi, Dwamutef, Ketsunwef, Ma'ah, Atef F, Keribek F, Heru, Kenti, and Ma'ati, place then Anpu as protectors of the dead body or the mummified body, the purified body of Alsar. Otherwise said, behind the place of purification of Alsar. And then they give another set of titles for those 7 different divinities. So what it's saying is, after Anpu embalmed the body of Alsar, purified the body of Alsar, made it impervious to decay, placed 7 illuminated, shining, venerable deities as protectors of the body of Alsar, the 7 energy centers that are protectors of the body and so forth. And Sepa is their Neb or their master. They are up under the governance of Sepa. The protectors of the body of Alsar, those 7 divinities, are connected to bunches of endings, are akin to the 7 quote-unquote karu, the shrines, the 7 which were later corrupted into the term kakra or chakra. So when you look in our book, off the origins of the term yoga, kara kasa, the origin and nature of the chakra, we show that the term kakra in Sanskrit, which is a more recent term, comes directly from kara in Ancient Kamit. And we show that in detail on why the term kara is rooted from the term kara, which means shrine. We show how these things are incorporated within the ritual context and culture of Kamit thousands of years before they exist in India. So it has nothing to do with India etymologically or even cosmologically. Even when you look at the text of India, when they're first talking about the chakras, they don't even know that there are 7. They don't even know what they are. They don't start talking about them as energy wheels until hundreds of years later. But when you look back thousands of years, you see this information incorporated within the cosmology of the culture of Ancient Kamit. We go into detail about that in our book, Ankh, the origin of the term yoga, Karakasa, the origin and nature of the chakra. But when Anpu, after embalming the body of Alsar, then places these 7 divinities, the illuminated divinities they're talked about as Aku, meaning illuminated ones, shining ones who are shining. Of course, these 7 centers, these 7 nerve ganglia are shining radiant centers and so forth, the illuminated 7 divinities that govern these 7 areas, and they're all up under the governance of the deity Sepa. And Sepa is in the structure of the peripheral nervous system, with the body in the middle and the various 42 sets of nerves emanating from the body. This is that centipede. And he's regulating and protecting the body, coordinating activities and so forth. This is why Sepa means judgment. Sepa means law. Sepa means condition. Sepa means case or case at law, talking about regulating order, regulating activities, administrating the affairs of state and so forth, which include the laws, of course, all these different things. But it also has to do with the structure of the body. 42 different sets of nerves, plus the regulating set, which makes it 43, 42 quote-unquote Nomes, or 42 Sepatu, with the administrative division of the capital being the 43rd and so forth. So this is where we get that information from. Now, when you look at this Centipede Divinity, and you look at, and it's true of animal totems in general, what we call Achinebois in general. We learn of these different things because we have direct experience. We learn about the functioning of Achinebois animal totems through direct experience of the Abosom, who operate through these entities and send them to us. Just like the Abosom can send a person to you and direct them to come into your presence and give you a message physically that you learn from the Nsamanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors spiritually at your shrine, or through ritual. They gave you an answer to a question or an answer to an issue or a dilemma and so forth. And the way they confirm it is when you go out throughout the course of the day and someone of that energy complex connected to the Abosom who's governing that issue, they put that person in front of you. You happen to, quote-unquote, bump into that person, someone you may not know, and they repeat exactly what your Nsamanfo told you, ritually and so forth, to confirm physically what you learned spiritually. That, of course, happens on a regular basis, and we can contextualize those experiences once we engage the ancestral religious process, ritual process, and so forth. The same is true with regard to the Achinebois, the animal totems. And, of course, in our Akan tradition, Aboa means animal, Aboa means smaller, wa, animal, which is insects. So those are Achinebois as well. To give you an example of how we learn directly from Achinebois or animal totems. We used this example before. A number of years ago, over a decade ago, when I lived in a specific part of the city in Chicago, moved into a brand new gut rehabbed place, apartment, and they just were finishing up gut rehab, new walls, new floors, new appliances, cabinets, and everything else. So I moved into this place, and then within a few weeks, noticed that there was a problem. There was a rodent problem. Saw a mouse show up. Now, this is a gut rehab place. Wasn't expecting to see that in a brand new, newly renovated place. And then I noticed that there were, over the course of a period of time, there would be a long period where there wouldn't be a problem. And then all of a sudden, one would show up. Then I also noticed that they would only show up at critical junctures when something major was about to happen in life and so forth, and they would show up. So one particular day when I was annoyed with the fact that this had happened once again after months and months of nothing taking place, the Nsamanfo stopped me in my tracks of being annoyed and reminded me specifically, number one, it only showed up when specific major issues were taking place and I needed a specific answer about something. Then they gave me some detail. They showed me at that moment that mice in the traditional culture, Okra, as it's called in Akan, are messengers of the Earth Mother, and they will come up out of the Earth Mother to bring messages from the Nsamanfo, the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spirits of the ancestresses and ancestors, to put you on the right track. That's what was taking place as a form of communication from the ancestral realm. Then they reminded me over the course of a number of months that the only time they ever showed up in this newly gut rehab place is when something major was going on or a warning was about to happen and something was just about to take place. And they reminded me that I even began to notice that if they showed up, then something was about to happen. I need to make certain adjustments, and then some major event would happen, and I was already prepared for that. Now, that's not to the exclusion of physically taking stock of what happened in the building. The person who owned the building had hired some Mexicans and some Eastern Europeans to do the work. They were cutting corners, and then when I started to investigate, I began to notice, even though the walls were new and the floors and everything else was new and the appliances and the cabinets, when you pull back the new appliances or you look near the walls, the baseboard connected to certain parts of the wall, there was an open space because they were cutting corners and didn't fully close it, or there was a space in between the new floor and the baseboard leading, down into the structures, the studs and so forth, or there was the base near a doorpost didn't go all the way down to the floor, and there was a small space. So, of course, I filled in those spaces, and eventually I moved out. So it's not to excuse that portion. Of course, it was shoddy work, but at the same time, they showed me a specific function. Years later, the confirmation came. This was back in the 90s. Years later, the confirmation came when I began to access the internet and decided to look up some information about Akan divination. I looked up some information and came across something I'd never seen before. I was, of course, used to seeing divination with shells, doing water divination, water gazing, and so forth, a number of different ways of doing divination. But in the Akan tradition, amongst the Baule Akan in Ivory Coast, there are 11 million Akan people in Ghana, 9 million Akan people in Ivory Coast. The Baule Akan are one of the largest groups in Ivory Coast and so forth. Amongst the Baule Akan, and there are others who do it as well, there's a form of divination that they call mouse divination. And what they have is a vessel, a wooden vessel, a Okraa, a wooden vessel, and they put certain sticks inside the vessel, and then they put a mouse in the vessel, and the mouse goes inside the vessel and walks inside and moves the sticks around depending on the way the pattern of the sticks fall as moved by the mouse. Then that determines what the answers are for the specific situations, and they're very precise answers. That's the form of divination, but then the story behind the mouse divination, as laid out in the tradition, as they talk about in primordial times, the spirits of the Okraa, the mice, could speak. They could talk. But at some point they left the villages and went into the forest. Then a spiritualist one day, one of the Abosom, one of the spiritualists, the priestesses, went into the forest and brought back one of the Okraa, one of the mice, and brought them back and put them in the vessel so that they could ask the questions and they could bring the messages. They stated in the Akan tradition the reason they were able to do that is because the Okraa, the mouse, is a messenger of Asase Afur, the Earth Mother, and they come from the earth to bring messages from the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. That's exactly what my Nananom Nsamanfo, my Akan ancestresses and ancestors told me years and years before, when I knew nothing about that form of Akan mouse divination or never heard of mouse divination, period, from any group, let alone the Akan. So they showed me what was already taking place. They showed me what I was already engaged in. I was beginning to have rudimentary understandings of the readings or the movements of these Achineboa animal totems being connected with the Earth Mother and the Nsamanfo, it was already happening. They gave me the details about what their function is as messengers of Asase for the Earth Mother to communicate with the ancestresses and ancestors whose gateway to the ancestral realm is the Earth Mother through burial and so forth. They showed me there was a connection between the mouse, the Earth Mother, and the ancestresses and ancestors and divination. Showed me through ritual experience, then gave me the detail. Then years later, they happened to direct me to a website which I was not looking for, and specific mouse divination with its story about the mouse, the Okraa, coming from the Earth Mother to bring the messages of the ancestresses and ancestors. Number one, that shows intergenerational and transcarnational transmission of Akan culture through the blood circle, even though it was not learned by someone on the continent. We were already engaged in that process, and they put me in that process so I could experience that process, then gave me the details and confirmed it years later after it had already been experienced. So that's number one. But number two, that notion of recognizing that animal life as well as plant life and mineral life and Afro-Akani human life, yes, we are children of certain deities. Some people are children of water divinities. Some people are children of fire divinities and so forth. The same is true of plant life, certain fiery plants. Some plants are more watery and so forth. Some plants are more airy and so forth. The same thing with mineral life, of course, but the same thing with animal life. Certain animals are connected to fire divinities. Certain animals are connected to water divinities. Certain animals are connected to the deities of the air and so forth and fire. So when we recognize the categories of these different deities and where we fit plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afro-Akani human life, then we recognize the different categories. We recognize our colleagues within the sacred animal totems, within the categories within which we operate, as well as other categories within which we may not operate directly, but we have a relationship with. So we begin to communicate with the Abosom through the agency of the messengers that they send us. Whether they sent the Okra, they sent a mouse and so forth, or they sent a crow, or if they sent a specific kind of cat or a specific kind of dog and so forth, or a specific kind of lizard or gecko, or a certain kind of snake outside, or whatever it is, they're connected to specific Abosom that have specific energy complexes that are related to you. The same is true with the Centipede Divinity called Asase Wa in Akan, that earth, quote-unquote, serpent, so to speak. That Asase Wa is a title of the centipede. When you see that entity show up, then you know it's an animal totem for a specific deity. That deity is Sepa in Ancient Kamit, Asase Wa in Akan. And every group has a name for that. So when you see them show up, it's a different thing. It's no longer, hey, this is just a bug running around in the house. Sometimes you may have just an entity running by in the house, but sometimes the Abosom, the Nsamanfo, the Orisha, and so forth, the Egungun will send an animal totem. We talked about in our Etchi sign presentation at the first Etchi sign conference. We talked about this notion of initiation. When you see people in Akan tradition, Yoruba tradition, Vodun tradition, and so forth, getting their head cut and medicine placed in the slits, or certain parts of the body, ritual cuts made and certain medicine being placed in the cuts and so forth, in that fashion, using, mineral life for the medicine or plant life for the medicine to place inside the cuts to make the person more receptive to the deity that governs their head so they can draw them in and hold that possession and communicate with them, and the Abosom will communicate with the people and so forth. But then we also talked about that an original process. What is the original process of the cut, and then the medicine being placed in the cut to be making the person a receptive vehicle for the deity. Of course, the first original process is when the deity comes down and possesses the individual and, quote-unquote, splits or cleaves the head of the individual and penetrates and gets inside the body of the person through spirit possession. That is a cut. It's an infusion of energy and now the deity is seated within the person temporarily to communicate with the community. That's first and foremost, and this is why in our book, Kamit, Ntoro, the Black Nation and Divinity, when we're talking about the origin of the term Ntoro, or so-called netter, and why it has the image of an axe, and the axe represents that cleaving or cutting, and we talk about the etymology of the term and so forth. We talk about the term prayer, meaning to cut or to cleave, creating an incision in the spirit realm that the Abosom and Nsamafo can enter through and so forth. The Ntoro means the same thing. Tall means to fall or come down. Ntoro meaning that it means that cutting or splitting, that axe is falling to split and cut an incision to create an opening so the deity can take up residence. We're the first to give the proper etymological origin of the term Ntoro, or so-called netter, and what it actually means cosmologically. We show it in Akan, Ntoro, as well as Ancient Kamit, and why the axe is used, which nobody understood that until we put that information forward. But that other process, when you deal with animal life, as we talked about in the Etchi sign presentation, when we cut someone's head or cut a certain part of the body and place medicine in the cut so that they become more receptive to the deity that governs their head, the original process is when the animal totem engages that process. So the Abosom will send a bee. The Abosom will send a wasp. The Abosom will send a scorpion. And then they sting, penetrate you with the stinger. Then the venom goes down the stinger into your bloodstream. That is the cut. That is the medicine going down, the venom going down to get into the bloodstream. Now you're receptive. You're receiving the essence not only of the animal, but if it's an animal totem for the deity, now you just receive the essence of the energy of the deity physically, and now you become a magnet to draw that deity's energy in. The deity comes down and takes up residence, possesses, becomes firmly seated, and communicates with you as well as the community. That original process of a sacred animal totem, the deity showing up through the agency of the animal to come and cut you and put that venom or that medicine or that energy within your bloodstream so they can have a pathway to take up residence in a firm fashion. That's the first initiatory process. Before there were priests and priestesses to initiate the first priests and priestesses, who initiated the first priests and priestesses? Who did the first cut? Who cut the first person and put the medicine in there if there were no priests and priestesses yet to do that? The Abosom sent these animal totems that manifest the energy and carry the energy of the Abosom to cut, to penetrate, to send that venom, to send that energy, and then we get possessed. And then once we're possessed, then we can go and engage in ritual practicing and engage in that cutting process to initiate the next person. So this is what we're talking about. So when you see a centipede, you see Sepa, one of his agents and so forth, moving through, we begin to recognize and have a different understanding. When you see that crow, or when you see that snake, or you see that little gecko, or you see that grasshopper, you see these different animal totems, and you no longer just move by them. Or you see the spider, you see a Nancy in the house, you no longer just immediately look for a way to kill them. You reassess and you contextualize. Why are they showing up? Why are they showing up at this particular time? Is this an animal totem being sent? And you begin to assess. One of the first things and the most important things you can do is communicate with the spirit of the animal or the entity who has shown up. And once you engage that process, then the Nsamafos begin to speak. You communicate just like you can communicate with a dog or a cat that's your pet, and you have a relationship with the dog or a cat. These animal totems, including the insect animal totems, are no different. When that spirit is an animal totem that's sent by the Abosom or sent by the Nsamafo, they're sent so that you will stop and communicate with the spirit of that entity, and then you begin to get the information. Stop to pay attention, because the Nsamafo made me stop and pay attention to the Okraa, to the mouse and so forth, as opposed to just being an annoyance, to communicate with what's actually happening. And they showed me what had been taking place in a certain pattern over the past few months. That was a manifestation of wisdom, and then years later showing that mouth divination is Akan culture, confirming for me that this is part of our Akan heritage in North America. And of course, we would do it differently. We would have a specific shrine. It's not about moving into a place that has a rodent problem. You would, have a specific shrine if you're going to engage that kind of divination. But the key is they show that's part of our direct blood ancestral inheritance. We see these animal totems show up in the house, see the Anansi show up in the house, see Sepa, the centipede, show up in the house. You communicate with the spirit of that animal in real time. And when you begin to focus your energy there, then the Nsama will begin to speak to you. Then when you go to the shrine, the next time you go to the shrine, and next time you engage in ritual practice, it becomes more intense because they recall that moment when they sent that energetic messenger into your space to stop you from being focused on whatever you've been distracted on and focus back on what you need to be focused on. So when they show up in the house and move by and run by and so forth, or stop long enough for you to communicate, then you engage that process and things begin to shift and you get a greater understanding. So this is what's happening with, you had the 42 administrative divisions plus the capital, regulating order within the society. You have the 42 pairs of nerves, 43 pairs of nerves, which includes the 42 divisions plus the capital, the central region, and so forth, regulating order within the body, attuned to every part of the body, coordinating events of the body within the body politic, within the physical body as well. But then you also have the spiritual body as well. And of course you have Sepa, the divinity, and the 7 deities that govern the 7 points of the nerve ganglia and so forth, which are part of the central or the peripheral nervous system and so forth. These energetic centers as well that are connected to your body, your divine living energy. All of that is connected. And so you see Sepa there connected. Now, we also have the 42 day calendar in the Akan tradition. There's a 7-day week in the Akan tradition governed by the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. Those solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week are animated by male and female Abosom. And if you're born on a specific day, that indicates that you are assigned to the deity that governs that day pre-incarnation. And because you were assigned to that deity pre-incarnation, the Abosom made sure that you were born on that deity's day to indicate to the people who you were assigned to before you even came into the womb. So the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, which are animated by male and female deities, they govern the 7-day week. And we show in our book, AKRADINBOSOM, Volumes 1 and Volume 2, that the 7-day week was founded by ancient Akan, ancient Kanat people, ancient quote-unquote Nubians and so forth, thousands of years ago. Of course, when we moved into ancient Kanana, so-called Canaan, and ancient Kangi, so-called Sumer, we took that 7-day week to those areas as well. And that's why you have the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies governed by deities in Sumer and later Babylon, the Akkadian Empire, later Babylon, and the white Nile Spring invading and corrupting different things. But they're the same deities with the same names. And when you look at the Sumerian titles, we show that in the Akan language, the Sumerian titles still exist in the same function. And we show these same deities with their same titles in Ancient Kamit. So we show that in our books. But you have, in the Akan tradition, we have a 42-day calendar. The 7-day week regulates everything. We're named after the deities that govern the 7 days of the week in the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. So if somebody's born on Ben-Nada, which is Tuesday, the day of the deity Benna, who is called Bedat in Ancient Kamit, Heru Bedat or Heru Bedet, which is operating through the planet Benna or Bedat, which is the white Nile Spring called Mars. That's Benna in Akan. He's called Ogun in the Yoruba tradition, Ogun in Vodun and so forth, Ikenga in the Igbo tradition. This is Benna in Akan, Heru Bedat in Ancient Kamit, the deity governing the divine immune system in the great divine body of creation, the immune system in the Afurakani body, the one who governs hot metal and war and so forth. So If you're born on Ben-Na-Da, if you're a male, you're called Kwa Ben-Na, or a servant of Ben-Na. The female divinity of Ben-Na-Da is Abena, which is Sekhmet. She's called Sechiman Akan, the Sechiman or Sechimet or Sekhmet in Ancient Kamit. Females who are born on that day are called Abena, named after the divinity and so forth. And it's the same is true with regard to all days of the week. But that 7-day structure is a superstructure that regulates everything in Akan society. Animals have Kradin, day names or soul names. Even the creator, Nyokumpon of the universe, has a Kradin, Nyokumpon Kwame, connected to the deity Amen. So when you look at Main, Ra, or Ra, Amen, and so forth, in Ancient Kamit you have Nyokumpon, which is Ra, Amen, or Ra, Kwame, and so forth. So if the creator of the universe has a Kradin or a soul name, or quote-unquote day name, animals have that, plants have that, Afrakani, human beings, of course, have that. These are the deities that regulate these 7 solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, regulate all natural cycles in creation. They regulate the different systems in our bodies as we show those 11 systems connected to those 11 male and female deities. They regulate all natural cycles in creation. So the entire structure of the society is governed by those 7 days. Now, the counting system in the Akan tradition is an inclusive counting system. So when you're talking about days in sacred time, you don't start off with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You start off with 1, the first day, and then you end on the 8th day, which is really the first day. The last day is also the first day because it has to do with the reincarnation. So you have Awusida, Joda, Benada, Awukuda, Yauda, Fida, Miminada. That's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Those are the 7 days. Solar, lunar, and planetary bodies govern those 7 days. The male and female divinities govern those planetary bodies and so forth for those 7 days. However, that's not a full week yet. Sunday to Saturday is the 7 days, but you don't complete the week until you say Sunday again. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday is the end of the cycle, but also the beginning of the next cycle. It's the end and the beginning at the same time. It's based on reincarnation and rebirth. We die, the body separates, spirit separates from the body and so forth, but then eventually we are reborn back into the physical world. So we're leaving, there's a death occurring in the spirit realm, so to speak. We're leaving our ancestral family and so forth, but at the same time there's a birth. So that inclusive counting system is the reason why a 7-day week in Akan culture is called Na Awochwe. Na means days, and Awochwe means 8. So the 7-day week is called the days 8, or 8 days. Why is it called 8 days? Because it's inclusive counting. You start, it's Sunday to Sunday. Final Sunday is the end of one cycle, but it's also at the same time the beginning of the new cycle. It's like when your spirit separates from your body. Now your body is gone into the ground, and the spirit goes to the ancestral realm. But at some point, when you reincarnate or rebirth occurs, then the spirit enters into the physical womb, into the zygote, the fusion of sperm and ovum. And now when they say 2 things can't occupy the same place at the same time, actually they can, because the spirit enters into that physical body and 2 things are occupying the same place at the same time. The end of one cycle, the end of the ancestral life, at the exact same time as the beginning of a new cycle, the beginning of life in the physical world. The same thing occurs with the New Year in the Akan tradition. The end of the warm cycle, which is around the fall equinox and so forth, that's the end of the warm cycle. That's the harvest time, but it's also the seeding time. So we say the ends of the year have met. The end of one cycle, the beginning of the next cycle. This is why we have 7 days, but it's called the Nawotwe, or the 8 days and so forth, because it's Sunday to Sunday, Awusida to Awusida. But that last day is also the first day, because 2 things are occupying the same place at the same time. It has to do with the reincarnation, rebirth, return, revolution. As we talked about earlier in the previous broadcast, When Earth moves around Sun and returns to its point of origin, returns to that same point, it has made a complete revolution. So when we return to our point of origin, we have made a full return or revolve revolution. This has to do with rebirth, Bebra, the return of an ancestral spirit back into the world and so forth. That's why we have that inclusive counting piece. That's why when we have 42 days, 6 sets of 7 days, you start with that Awusida or Akwesida, that sacred ancestral Sunday, Akwesiadai or Awukwadai, and then you go all the way through 6 sets of 7 weeks, and you end up on the next Awusiadai or Akwesiadai, which is the quote-unquote fulfillment of the 42 days, but it's really the 43rd day, but it's also the first day of the next cycle. So it's a 42-day quote-unquote cycle, but the 43rd day is also the first day of the new cycle. So sometimes you'll see people talking about the Adadria 9 is a cycle of 40 days plus 2 sacred days, or sometimes they'll say it's really a 43-day cycle, but they don't explain why it's a 42-day cycle, but it's also said to be 43 because the final day of one cycle is also the first day of the next cycle. The same occurs, and each one of the days is governed by specific Abosom. It regulates all aspects of Akan society. It's a sacred unfolding calendar regulating every aspect of our society. That's why you have 42 days plus the final day, which is also the end of one cycle, beginning of the next. That's the 43rd. That's why you have 43 pairs of nerves that regulate all aspects of the body, 43 Sepat, administrative divisions that occasions, times, systems, or conditions of judgment and law and so forth that regulate the body politic and coordinate all activities. This is where this comes from. And 42 days are not contradiction. But those 42 days are governed by divinities, deities. So then you look into Runu Pert Imheru once again, and you see the 42 assessors of Maat in the dual hall of Maat, the Usek Ma'ati, or the dual hall of Maat. So when one goes to weigh their heart against the feather after they make their transition, and every Afurakani person and only Afurakani people have to go through that process, have to go through the process of once their physical body is separated from the spirit and so forth, the spirit goes before the tribunal, goes before the 42 assessors of Ma'at and so forth. The heart is weighed against the feather to see if it balances out, if it's too heavy because it's weighted down by lust and malice and self-destructive activity and experience and so forth. It outweighs the feather and then is consumed by Amut, and that means the person will not be accepted into the ancestral community. They'll be left to be earthbound, hanging out with a place where they were died or where they were murdered and so forth, having a very negative existence, no different than someone who becomes homeless, crackhead, heroin addict and so forth. They're hanging around transient. People are not embracing them. People are not trying to connect with them. They're reaching out or even lashing out at people, and people are either attacking them, beating them down, or ignoring them and so forth, and they're suffering. The same thing happens with the quote-unquote homeless spirit. But if your heart is in harmony and balances out the feather because it's light as a feather or a flame, then you are accepted in the ancestral community to live in peace for the next 100 or more years until it's time for you to return through Bebra reincarnation back into the world, which is a sacred process. We recognize Asaseyafu and Asaseya, the two earth mother divinities. These are deities. So when we return to the world, we're returning to a sacred divine place. It's the whites and their offspring who hate the world. It's the whites and their offspring who put forth this stupid notion that we should be escaping the cycle of reincarnation and escaping the world, and the only time you come back into the world is if you didn't complete your task, and you have to come back if you didn't complete your task. To them, being in the world and their perverse melanin recessive bodies and perverse spirits, that is a task, that is hateful, that is degenerate and so forth. They despise the world. That's why they seek to destroy everything in the world, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani human life in various ways. But the reality is the world is divine. The world is Asaseafu and Asasiya, two earth mother goddesses, deities, divinities. And then the different features of their physical body, the planet, oceans, rivers, atmosphere, and so forth, are shrines for other Abosom deities, divinities, sacred forces in nature as well. So we're entering into a divine space when we return into the world. So you're accepted by the ancestral community if your heart balances out the feather. But before you get to the ancestral community, after you've gone through, as we talked about in our 3-part series on the god Ma'at, after you go through that balancing point in that judgment scene with Ma'at, you must go through a judgment scene with the male deity Ma'at, which is very extensive, and in the Runu Pert Imheru is one of the most extensive chapters in the Pert Imheru, where you're interrogated by the god Ma'at to make sure you lived in harmony with order. And once you pass that interrogation, then he will ferry you across the great river to the ancestral realm. So you have, when you look in the dual hall of Ma'at, Usek Ma'ati, in the spirit realm, you have 42 assessors in that great divine hall. And if you look in the physical body, you see the great divine hall in that regard. You have one in the heavenly realm and in the earthly realm, meaning below the neck, and the heavenly realm is in the head and so forth. Ma'at, the center of balance in the body, in the heavenly realm is the vestibular system, as we've talked about in our broadcast and in the article in the book, in the Etchy Sign book, volume 2. The dual hall of Ma'at, she deals with balance, law and balance, and so forth. Of course, the center of balance in your body in the heavenly region, the head region, is the vestibular system within the ear canal. So the 2 ear canals leading to the inner ear, the vestibular system, right and left, are the 2 halls of Ma'at. That's why it's Usek Ma'ati, the 2 dual T halls of Ma'at. Those 2 halls lead to the balancing points. So that's in the physical body. In the text, you will see, in the hall of Ma'at, you will see the 42 deities lined up and invocations to these 42 divinities. And in our book, KOKOBO, in the section dealing with the divine prohibition against dissexuality, homosexuality, and Ancient Kamit, and dissexuality was never accepted in Ancient Kamit, we talk about that process of going before each divinity and invoking ritually each divinity first by name. That's the invocation. That's the expansive portion. Then the contractive portion is indicating to the divinity that you have not violated that aspect of creation that they govern, and they search your spirit to see if you lived in harmony with the aspect of creation they govern. You invoke them first. That's the expansive pole of that ritual process. And then the contractive pole is you say what you have not done, what you have not done. You have not violated this or that. It is not this notion of just reciting 42 laws or principles. That's nonsensical. These are not 42 commandments or 42, quote-unquote, admonitions. The enunciations, these 42 enunciations, are ritual invocations of deity. As we said before, just like you have in your home, people who engage in ancestral religion, they have shrines in their home. They have a shrine to Abosom. They have a shrine to Nananom Samafo. They have a shrine to Orisha, Egungun, Vodou, Kuvito, and so forth. You walk into someone's home, whether it's your own home or someone else's home who practices tradition. You come in the house, you take off your shoes, they take your coat and so forth. If you're in your own house, take off your shoes, put up your coat. The first thing you do is go before the shrine, you salute the shrine. If it's a shrine of the Abosom, you salute the Abosom. You have a shrine to another Abosom, you salute that Abosom. You go to the next shrine, you salute the ancestral spirits and so forth. If you're in the house of someone who's in the Orisha tradition, you walk in the house, the first thing you see at the front door is the warriors and so forth. You see Eshu and then the Papa Ogun and Oshosi and Osun and so forth. The first thing you do is salute those Orisha. Then you move further into the house. Before you sit down and start talking and eating and doing what you're doing, the first thing you do is go salute the shrine of the Orisha that they have in their house. If they have more than one, you go from one room to that shrine, to the next room, to the next shrine, and then you go and do what you need to do. We do this on a regular basis every day. So then when you make your transition, you do the exact same thing because you've been invoking these 42 divinities throughout the course of your life. So, of course, once you get to the ancestral realm and the dual hall of Ma'at, you go before each deity, just like you did at home, and took off your shoes and went before and prostrated before the shrine, invoke that divinity by name and harmonize your spirit with theirs. Then you get up and go to the next one. You do the exact same thing with 42 different deities. That's part of that process. So we go into detail about that process in the KOKOBO book, but the key here is when you see the 42 deities governing these different aspects of creation, you see the individual invoking each one, you see all 43 lined up, but then the 43rd deity is the deity sitting on the throne adjudicating the entire process, and that is Alsar, because of course that leads up to the realm that he governs. Once you go through that process of the balancing of the heart as well as the interrogation with the God Ma'at, Alsar as well as Alset regulate the ancestral or spirit realm. So you see the 43 divinities, and then you see the one who is at the head, the chief, the capital, and so forth, regulating what the 42 deities are doing. So 42 deities, and then he's the 43rd and so forth, all within the hall of Ma'at. Once again, you have those 43 pairs of nerves. You have the 42 Nomes plus the 43rd piece, which is the capital. Just like in the United States, you have the 50 states, but then you have the federal city, which is the capital, which is separate from the 50, but regulates the 50 and so forth. We have the 42 days in the Akan tradition. The 43rd is the end of one cycle and the beginning of the next cycle. So everything we're talking about is all connected. And Sepa, that Centipede Divinity, who regulates and coordinates activities, just like the nervous system, peripheral nervous system, regulating, coordinating activities throughout the entire body at all times, whether you're awake or whether you're asleep. He's regulating those 7 different deities who are the protectors of the body of Alsar, meaning the purified body, the impervious body, and so forth. Those 7 nerve ganglia that are connected to those 7 illuminate centers of energy and so forth. This is why they're the 7 Aku, or illuminated spirits and so forth, protecting the body of Alsar. All of these different things are connected. That's why Sepa, the Centipede Divinity sitting right in the midst of the body, is also the name given to the Sepat, each division, each condition, each occasion, each judgment center, each law center, and so forth. All these definitions of Sepa are all connected to the deity Sepa. The whites and their offspring never understood the relationship between the deity Sepa, his function as the quote-unquote Centipede Divinity, him being the master of the 7 Aku, or illuminated spirits who govern the purified body of Alsar, him being the connection, literally the physical manifestation of the 43 pairs of nerves, him being Sepa, governing the 42 Sepat, or the Nomes of Kamit, plus the 43rd, which is the capital city and so forth, which is Min Nefer, which means the abiding, beautiful, excellent place and so forth. They never understood the connection between this deity, his name, the name of the Nomes, the name for Nomes and so forth, his function in the body, his function in creation, and so forth. We are the first to put that forward, of course, in the Akan tradition with the 42 days, which we regulate our lives by. Throughout the course of our lives, that continuous cycle of 42 days governed by the various deities on a regular basis, that comes directly from these 42 administrative divisions that are regulating order within the body politic or within the society, within the civilization. 42 nerves regulating order within the body in concert with the endocrine system, which regulates those institutions. So the whites and their offspring never understood those concepts. We are the first to put that information out. This is the first time you will hear or read of that anywhere by whether it's white Egyptologists or black people who have been following what the white Egyptologists have been saying. They have no knowledge of who the deity Sepa is. We know who the divinity Sepa is, first and foremost, by communicating directly with him through the agency of his Aboawa, or Achine Aboawa, his animal totems, which we have been directed to communicate with for years and so forth. Whenever they show up, begin to realize this is the divinity. Find out who this deity is, what its function in creation is. Of course, later on, you're always going to have confirmation, but the communication with the divinities themselves is key. No different than the communication with the messengers, the Okraa, the mouse, the messengers of Asasefu and Asaseya, and the Nananoma and Samanfo. And then later on, the confirmation, oh yes, this form of mouse divination has been a part of Akan culture for millennia. But them showing and having that experience of that form of divination in our living experience, first and foremost, and then the confirmation coming later, that's just a commentary on what's already taking place. When you deal with Sepa as a spirit, as a divinity, and his messenger shows up in your house and you communicate with that spirit, and then you learn directly from the divinity, the confirmation, of course, is going to come later. Of course, when you look in the books, Sepa is going to be related phonetically to the Sepat. Of course, it's going to be in the body. Of course, it's going to be connected to the Nomes. Of course, it's going to be connected to the 42 Assessors of Maat. Of course, it's going to line up because it is what it is. This is why people engage that process. If you look at the various different deities, you'll see that they're connected to the different organs and systems within the body, because the deities are literally the organs and systems within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. So when you look in your physical body, of course, you're going to see those replications of these deities and their functions. And you will find that in various traditions, when you hear about Vodou being connected to certain organs, and certain Orisha connected to certain organs, and Abosom connected to certain organs and so forth, that's always been the case. And the same thing in Ancient Kamit. And when you look in the language and culture of Kamit, you will find the relationships precise and directly on point with regard to the names, the functions in the physical body as well as in the body of the country itself. So that's the information we wanted to go through. Of course, this will be part of an upcoming book, an upcoming publication, just as we have done in the past. When we put forward information, sometimes we publish a book first and then go over the information, or publish an article first and then detail the information in the broadcast. Sometimes we put the broadcast out first and then we release the information later, because we want to just get the information out and not have people have to wait for the printed publication. For example, we did that with Rekit Henasperet, the etymology and cosmology of religion and spirit. We had the information. We had not yet had a chance to publish it because we were publishing other books at the time. So we did the broadcast first, laid the information out in the broadcast first, showing that the terms religion and spirit, religion and spirituality, but religion and spirit are the same term. They have the same meaning. They are identical in reality. And we showed their etymological origins and cosmological origins in the language of Ancient Kamit. So the terms religion and spirit do not come from Europeans. Both of those terms come directly from the language of Ancient Kamit and Kanat. We show that phonetically, etymologically, but we also show it cosmologically within the cosmology of the culture, which shows you how these terms were birthed from the movements of the deities. So we did the broadcast first, and then we published the book later, and the book is out. And the same thing will happen here. We wanted to put this information out first because we're working on some other things right now, and we're going to have to publish this after we finish those things, but we didn't want to have people wait for months and months and months, so we put the information out here first. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, you can hit the number 1 on the phone line, or you can post something in the chat room. But that's the information that we did want to highlight tonight. For those who are also unaware, we have a couple of things coming up. We have the Etchi Sign Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference, the 3rd annual, coming up in March here in Washington, D.C., the weekend of March 24th, 25th. We have some of the information on the website now. and we will be updating that website very soon. So keep checking that, but we have the basic information out there now. And it's the same structure as the previous. We have presenters dealing with ancestral religion, born of our blood circles here in North America, the Akan tradition, which is the hoodoo tradition, preserved in our blood circles in North America, the voodoo tradition, which is the Evian phone tradition, preserved in our blood circles in North America, the Juju tradition, which is the Yoruba tradition, preserved in our blood circles in North America, the Wanga tradition, which is the Ovambo tradition, preserved in our blood circles in North America, the Ngangai tradition, which is the Fang tradition, preserved in our blood circles in North America. Those things we maintain for hundreds of years here, and we still have these ritual practices fully formed and intact, unbroken for hundreds of years, even going back thousands. So we are not dependent on anyone outside of our direct ancestral blood circle here in North America for our ancestral traditions. We brought them with us when we were forced over here, and we've passed them down uncut, intergenerationally and transcarnationally. That is what we're dealing with, Echi-san, ancestral religious reversion, reverting back to our original pristine practice, ritual state, and so forth. So you'll see information on that. That's in March. Next month in February, we have our first annual Hapi Merit Hibernation Training, Cultural, and Ritual Retreat that is happening on Edisto Island in South Carolina, one of the Gullah Islands, the weekend of February 16th. So that's also President's Day weekend. The sessions, the workshops for Obedima Afro-Akani Manhood based on our book, and Obatain Afro-Akani Womanhood based on the book of the same name. I'll be conducting the manhood workshops. Dr. Ia Adjua will be conducting the womanhood workshops. She'll be doing that for the sisters. We'll also have the joint sessions as well. Those will be occurring on that Meminida and Awusida, that Saturday and Sunday, the 17th and the 18th. People will arrive on the 16th. The sessions will happen on the 17th and 18th, Meminida and Awusida, Saturday and Sunday. Of course, people leave Monday morning on the 19th and so forth. So, but we'll have those sessions in the morning and early afternoon, in the evenings, early evenings and so forth, late afternoon, early evenings. People can go out and vacation, explore the Gullah Islands and the trustery and culture and so forth, and do whatever they want to do. We're just having the sessions in the mornings and early afternoons for both days on the weekend. So we have, we said in the previous broadcast, we had a couple of spaces left over because of cancellations. Over the weekend, we had a couple of people who showed interest, so we have another space left. If you would like to take that space, reserve that space, you need to go to the Hapi Merit page as soon as possible. It's first come, first serve for that last space for the retreat. You'll see all of the information there. That retreat again, February 16th through the 19th. So that's the next thing that is coming up. Okay, we have a couple of calls on the phone line. Michelle on the phone line, number 9440. You had a question or comment?
Hi, Brother Kwesi. I had a quick question regarding the 42 Assessors of Maat. I did look them up, so I know who they are. But my question is there's so many different variations of, I guess what you call the 42 negative confessions and so forth and so on. So with those, in looking it up, I guess what I'm trying to understand is because the variations of the different, I don't know what you want to call negative confessions, whatever you want to call them, I'm trying to make the correlation between the deity and that particular quote-unquote negative confession. Is there a place where you can look up information for each specific deity, or because I haven't seen anything regarding them outside of that text? And I guess the translations that I'm looking up, that I'm seeing, they're confusing because they're clearly from the whites and their offspring, but I don't know where to go to get a more accurate reflection of the correlations so that I can make sure I'm fully understanding or have some type of understanding for the specific deity, their character, outside of just, I'm doing the invoking, but I just kind of want to make sure that I understand a little bit more about the role they play in that as an assessor in that respect.
Okay. So, yeah, in fact, sometimes you'll have slight variations of descriptive titles for them, but there's two things about it. The key is finding a transliteration, which is, say, for example, you look in Budge's Pert Imheru, so-called Book of the Dead, you'll have the text, the Medutu, one line of that, then a line of a transliteration, then the third line is the translation. So you can see the transliteration, you can actually see the Medutu themselves, so you can decipher those yourself and go through that yourself. And the names themselves, now you'll find many of these different divinities, and like when you start looking, you have to look in the pyramid text, look in the coffin text, as well as, the Runu, Pertinent, Meru, and you'll find these different deities in different capacities. It's a little bit more difficult to get your hands on the coffin text. Some of the pyramid texts are out there, but then even with that, you have to, sift through, and sometimes you'll get, like Maspero's book or, the ones that are written in French or written in German and stuff like that, but at least they will have the lists themselves. But even if you look at the Pertinent Heru first and foremost, and find the actual transliterations and the actual glyphs themselves, so you can see the names. The names are key, because then you can look in the Akan language, which we do, and we're going to, again, as we said earlier, we're going to have that, one of the projects coming up that will be published, we plan to this year, is that comparative dictionary of the Akan language and the, Medutu. So all those different terms, you see them in the Akan language. You have a, comparative dictionary. But you can look in the Akan dictionary for details about those, names cosmologically, because those names still exist, or the roots of those names still exist. But the key is the names themselves, because once you start utilizing those names themselves, through invocation, then that draws those Abosom to you. Also the Unsamanfo who are governed by them, and they'll give you better insight into who they are. But just experiencing them gives you that insight as well.
Can I ask one more question? Because what I'm doing right now is I'm doing the libations. I primarily do this on my crowd. I do the libations to each one of them. As far as invoking them, is that something you separate on different days? Because I guess what I'm saying is, when you're doing an invocation, it's like if you try to do all of them at one time, it's overwhelming, because they all have different characters and provide different energy. So I'm a little bit unsure of what is the best way when it comes to approach invoking them. Is it something to be spread out, or even when you're going to the shrine, just maybe in general, not just specifically regarding these Abosom, but is there any type of, I don't want to say rule of thumb, but the energy is so different. Sometimes I wonder, how many should I be invoking, or is there some type of methodology, I guess, to it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, so you'll find this in our different traditions. You'll find whether it's, Akan or Eve or different ones, you'll find very often people start off with the Great Mother, Great Father, Supreme Being, the Creator and Creatress, some of the other major primordial divinities, then the deities that govern their head, the deities that govern their patriclan and matriclan, specific Abosom or Orishas that they are working with. But then you'll see in prayers or texts, they'll mention, and you'll see this in Yoruba tradition and other traditions, they'll have a line talking about all of the Abosom, meaning like all of the other divinities that I have not named. They'll include that in a line of the prayer. Right. Nananom, right. So the Nananom Abosom Nina, which means Nina means all. Or sometimes you'll see in a text with Akan, they'll talk about the 30 Abosom of a certain area. That's, on one hand, it can mean 30 different deities. Sometimes it's talking about all of the deities of the area. That's like a euphemism of saying all of the divinities that are regulated. So it's not always that you invoke every single one. In various traditions, often there's specific ones that you're working with, that you're, connected to on a regular basis, one governing the head and the patriclan and matriclan and so forth. But then, and the ones you're guided to invoke at that time, but then that statement of all of the other Abosom as well. Just like some people evoke some specific ancestors and ancestors in a certain capacity, and then they will have some line like all of the Nsamamfo, Nanonoma Nsamamfo of this clan as well. They'll name some, but then the other piece will be inclusive of the rest. So it's not a situation where you specifically must invoke each of the 42 Assessors of Maat every single day, per se. Mm-hmm. But you have to, the key is with regard to that kind of process, that invocatory process, you make those decisions about who needs to be invoked and so forth with the Nsamamfo. And then once you develop that, then that's what you move forward with. But it's not a thing where you just grab a text and just, have to read, a certain number every single day. It's who should we be focused on. Of course, you're going to be focused on your Okraa, AKRADINBOSOM and the Abosom governing your Abusia and, Ntoro and so forth. But who should we be focused on a regular basis? And then others, sometimes they will show up because of a necessity, a specific need. But then other times it would be an inclusive statement for the others, for all of the others.
Okay. Brother Quincy, I just have one more question. So of the 42 Assessors of Maat, so I know Feni, Fenti, I know that's, that was Tahuti, right? Is that right?
Right, that's the title of Tahuti.
Okay, so that's, and then let me ask you, Basti, the B-A-S-T-I, is that Bast or is that, sometimes the spelling varies, so it makes it a little bit challenging of knowing if this is the same deity as, as another one that you may be familiar with, that the spelling is just a little bit different.
Right. So that's Bast in that context. Then you have Font to Fenti, which is Tahuti. And you'll see some of them are, deities that you're familiar with, that are, that you're kind of more familiar with. And there's some ones that you're not as familiar with because you don't see them regularly and just, more popular texts that are out. But you will find them in different places. You find them in different places in the Persian Heru. You find them in the coffin text and the pyramid text. So as well as some of the other papyri that, that are not as well, people that don't talk about so much, that are not popularly talked about, but they still, of course, exist. But so some of them are different divinities. Some of them are titles, descriptive titles of more popular deities.
Or ones that, so that's going to be a part of the work you guys are going to be putting forth that you're talking about. You'll be sharing, I guess, who each one of these are as it relates to maybe ones we already know and maybe we don't know?
Yeah, in fact, so that'll be, that's like a separate project. So for the dictionary, it'll be, just like a comparative dictionary, like the hieroglyphic dictionary and the Akan, tree dictionary, and showing all the different terms. Now, for the 42 Assessors of Maat, that'll be part of a separate publication. Now, some of the information you can find, the references, even in Budget's dictionary, they'll show that Fanti or Font is a title of Tahuti. Of course, we can prove that, like in our book, Sankofa, Fa, and Ifa, talking about Tahuti, we prove that Fa is Fa in Akan and Fa in, Vodun and Ifa in Yoruba and Font in Ancient Kamit, which is the title of Orumila, Tahuti, Prechiri Hunuate, and all of that. We're going through a whole bunch of detail to prove who that deity is in the various traditions, and that he's Font in Ancient Kamit. He has the great nose and so forth. So, we can. That's a totally separate work dealing with those 42 as well as Ma'a and Ma'at. So that's another one coming as well. Okay.
And I know I said it was my last question, but I have one more. So my sons have really started kind of stepping up their shrine work. And this week, each one of them has wanted to create a talisman, for specific Abosom. And I think I emailed you about one of my sons. wanting to create a specific talisman for I think it was Nana Arat. That's what it was. So, for as we're talking about these different, Abosom, and as what is the best way, I guess, to create a talisman? I'm saying it because I kind of have a way I think it should be done, but I haven't done it, and I'm also obviously one to guide my son in something that I really haven't done for myself. So, like, for example, my other son mentioned one of them wanted to do Nana Arat for his legs. He does track. And then my other son yesterday said I don't know the Abosom for confidence, but he wanted to create a talisman, for confidence. What would you recommend in a situation like that when you have children coming to you saying, hey, I want to create a talisman? They see there's a need there. It's just something I haven't done. What would I say?
Well, the first thing is you would go, like you said, you hadn't done it yet yourself. You want to find out, from your Nsamafo, because you're the central, player in the piece, what needs to be happening. You'll have a sense from your Nsamafo because they came, your children came through you. Is this having to do with something simple protection, so to speak, or are one or more of them slated to be healers or have some other ritual capacity within the community? Then that takes it to a different level. Some of those things with, abstract things like courage or, strength or resilience or things like that, those are attributes of energy complexes, manifestation of certain deities and the way they operate and function. So sometimes it's not, I need a talisman for courage. Sometimes it's getting more in harmony with the deity that governs your head, or getting more in harmony with the deity that governs your patriclan or matriclan that carries the energy that you will wield that generates the effect of courage, but not just saying, hey, I want some courage. Maybe I need to get in alignment with Nana Afram. When I get in alignment with that deity, one of the outgrowths of that will be a manifestation of KOKOBO or courage and so forth. So sometimes it's the divinity itself, more so than the abstract principle that's born of, the energy complex of the deity. So you want to be able to sort that out. And the way you sort it out is dealing directly with them, the Abosom and the Nsamafo through you first, and then you can share with them, that plan.
Okay. I noticed that you said courage instead of confidence. So do I take it that they are one and the same, so to speak?
Well, I mean, I would say they're gradients of one another.
Okay.
They're not 100%. Because confidence, has to do, on one hand, more so with knowledge also. And when you're knowledgeable about something, you're more confident within it. But courage can be simply, you see a kid in a burning building and you rush toward the burning building to save them, whether you're going to die or not. So that's the difference. It has knowledge and foresight, but it's slightly different. So it's like gradients of one another.
And one last question, my son is waving at me. Can you create one talisman that involves energy of more than one Abosom? I'm not quite clear on that. What I had mentioned to him is I've seen people have talismans where maybe they use specific beads, where maybe they had, they had captured the energy of different Abosom in different beads and kind of created a necklace with the beads from representing the energy of the different Abosom. But my son's question is, can that energy from different Abosom be put into one object, into one talisman, like a necklace?
There are some. In fact, if you Google, the Eye of Heru, for example, sometimes you just see the eye itself, which is a major talisman, but then sometimes you see the eye flanked by Wachet and Nekabet. So that's the Eye of Heru plus those two deities as well, all in one talisman. And sometimes you'll see, different deities together, and you'll see Amen Mut and Shensu all together in one talisman. So yeah, that takes place.
Okay. That's my last question. May I say, I apologize. I took up so much time just trying to make sure that I'm, answering their questions and mine at the same time, so I'm leading them in the right direction. May I say?
Oh, no. Yeah, I say that. Appreciate it. Michelle on the phone line, number 7352. You had a question or comment?
What's up, Brother Quasi?
What's up?
In terms of career or job goals and life planning from the Achiwadifo perspective, that usually entails time management with schedules and objectives and program management and all that type stuff, as well as a certain amount of stress and sometimes disappointment when things don't go as planned. And if you don't have a goal or a life plan or whatever, it's kind of like you're frying.
Oh wait, you cut off. Did you accidentally hit the mute? Because I can't hear anything from you. Hello? Hold on. Yeah, no, I can't hear anything. It just went silent. So it sounds like the caller, it sounds like you may have muted it accidentally. Or you can try to, you could try to call back with it. Hold on one second. All right, can you hear now? Okay, you might need to try to hang up and call back and see if that'll work. We got one more call. Michelle on the phone line, number 0217.
Good night, Brother Crazy. In your broadcast tonight, you mentioned that when as Chinagua, you should communicate with the Abosom of the specific animal, like the Abosom of the mouse, the crow, the tiger. But how does one determine the Abosom of the Chinagua?
Right. You said, how does one determine did you say the Abosom of the Achenebois? Is that what you said?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, on one hand, if you have some information, depending on the culture you're talking about, some people have already laid the information out. So, like for example, in the Yoruba tradition or the Akan tradition or Vodun tradition or different ones that people kind of know about, they can tell you who's who. They'll know that, the serpent is dealing with Dambala or Dangbe and, different animals connected to different Orisha, Vodou, and Abosom and so forth. But sometimes we're from traditions that are not as popular, or we're from traditions that kind of are, but we don't have access to information and so forth. But whether it's ancestral or whether it's dealing with the Abosom, Deities, it always goes back to the same process. It always goes back to direct experience, goes back to consistent practice, which is our obligation anyway as adults. Like, children follow our lead, but until they become grown, but it's our responsibility, our obligation to invoke the Abosom that governs our head, our patriclans and matriclans, as well as evoke our Nananom and Samafo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct spirit-genetic blood circles. It's our responsibility to engage them and engage them consistently. of course, it's our responsibility to live our lives and operate under our power, but then we are, we're part of an interdependent, organal structure. So cells don't exist in and of themselves for their own purposes. They're connected to other cells, and other cells are connected to other organs and glands and so forth. So they operate under their own power, but they're also fed and, supported by the cells and so forth. So we operate under our own power and make our own decisions and so forth, but we are influenced, guided, and empowered by the deities and ancestral spirits. So our obligation to invoke them and evoke them on a regular and consistent basis, whatever the time frame that you use, whether it's every other day or every 3 days or specific days of the week, or whatever it is that you establish with your Nsamafo and Abosom. That's, that depends on your group or you individually. But when you have that in place, then that consistent communication is where you learn and you get to confirm who's who. What Chinambo are connected to deities, Abosom, which ones are connected to ancestral spirits or a combination thereof. And then they'll give you confirmations over and over again so that you'll know for sure. But it always goes back to that consistent practice. If you don't have, someone who's involved in tradition who already knows, like a great-grandmother or something like that, or grandparent or parent or uncle or aunt who already has that catalog of information that's secondhand knowledge to them.
Okay, so a lot of it has to do with invoking of the Abosom of our specific matriclan, patriclan, and so on, because they would be the same Abosom of the Achinibwa.
Right, as far as, for those specific ones. So, but then you have, Abosom that governs your own head first and foremost. But then, the patriclan and matriclan. But starting off with the Abosom that govern your head and with the just communicating with your spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, they have those answers. They already know because they've lived the culture, as human beings, when they were living here and they were operating under those same Abosom themselves. So they know exactly who's who. They can share with you who's who, which they probably have in different ways, but they can constantly share with you who's who and share with you, confirmations of that. So dealing with the deities that governs your head as well as your people, your ancestresses and ancestors. But then, of course, when you deal with the patriclan and matriclan Abosom, they will show that as well.
Okay. So am I getting this right? So the Abosom that governs your head is your AKRADINBOSOM, the one that,
right,
for the day that you were born.
Right.
So that if you were like a Tuesday, it would be the Abosom of Tuesday.
Right. For those who are Akan, so because different groups like Yoruba and Ebe and other people, they have their own approach to the deity that governs their head. But in the Akan tradition, the pact that we have with the Abosom is they will send us through within a 7-day cycle through on the day connected to the deity that we were assigned to before we got into the world. So if it was Benada Tuesday, if a male is born, then they're governed by the deity Benna, which is Heru Bedat or Ogun and so forth, and they're called Kwabena. The same thing with Abena, they're governed by the female divinity Abena or Sekhmet Sechima. So yes, that's the deity governing their head.
Okay. All right. Thanks for answering my question, Medase.
Okay. Yeni Asera.
Yes.
And with regard to the nature of the Abosom that govern the head, we go into detail about that in Volume 2 of AKRADINBOSOM. So when you go before Nyamewa and Nyame, the Great Mother and Great Father, as a spirit, as a Sunsum, they direct a divinity to take up a residence in your head region, and that becomes your Kra or your Krawa, the divinity that governs the head region. But that divinity, that Kra, its name is Kwa Bena or Ah Bena, because it is a child of the great deity Bena. So, for example, Bena is Heru Behudet, Ogun in the Yoruba tradition, Heru Behudet in Ancient Kamit. Abena is Sekhmet. She's also called Bedat or Bedid in Ancient Kamit. So that's why we call them Bena and Abena, because they call Bedat and Bedat in Ancient Kamit. They govern the immune and lymphatic systems in the great divine body. So, if you are to be a spirit that carries that energy into the world, Amen and Amenet or Nyamewa, Nyame and Nyamewa will direct a deity to take up residence in your head region. That deity will be one who's infused with the energy of Bena, if it's a male, or Abena, if it's a female. And that deity is a child of the great deity Bena. For example, Bena governs the planet Bena, also called Mars. If you imagine the great planet Mars, the great red planet, Inyame direct a deity to take up residence in your head region. First, that little small deity, like a miniature Bena, a miniature little red planet, goes through and is infused with the power of the great red planet Bena. And then that miniature Bena, that child of Bena, takes up residence in your head region, and that soul name is Kwa Bena. This is why we say it's the soul's name. You have your own name. You're a spirit. You're a Sunsum. But the deity in your head region, his name is Kwa Bena. And since he's associated with you, then you can call yourself Kwa Bena as well. But that deity that's dwelling in your head region, if you're male, his name is Kwa Bena because he's a child or servant, Kwa, of the great deity Bena. He's a little red disc in your head that's a child of the great red disc or planet, which is Bena. He's like a little Ogun that was birthed from the great Ogun. And the same thing with Sekhmet. One of her daughters, one of her millions of daughters, is a little red feminine disc of power that's dwelling in the head region of the female born on Benada. She's called Abena. Her soul's name is Abena. Her name may be Amoa, or Atoapema, or no, not Atoapema, maybe Kosuya or something like that, or Jama. That's a praise name for Tuesday born. Her name may be Jama, and then her soul's name will be Abena. So she's Abena Jama because she's Jama, but her soul's name. For example, my name is Ra Nehem. That's the name connected to my spirit. My soul's name is Kwesi. He's a Kwa Asi, or the subject or servant of Kwa Asi. So he's Kwasi. The deity dwelling in my head region is a servant or subject of the great Asi, or Alsir, or Alsar. So my soul's name is Kwasi. I'm Ra Nehem. Most people will know me by Ra Nehem. Some people call me Kwesi because they know that's my soul's name, that's his name, that deity that's dwelling in my head region that I communicate with. He's a child of the great Asi or Alsir, Alsar, and so forth. So, and then the titles of Jirafo. But that's what's going on. So, it's only a minute left in the broadcast, but all that information and details in the AKRADINBOSOM book, Volume 2. For those who would like to get that last space in the Happy Merit Retreat, it's first come, first serve, so you can go to the Happy Merit page to deal with that. If you support the work we are doing, the books we've had out, we talked about, we've had about 4,000 downloads of our books on a monthly basis, over 55,000 downloads of the free books over the past 12 months. If you support the work we're doing, we have two things going on. Go to the page for the documentary film that we're trying to get completed within the next 30 days. You can contribute to that effort. We've reached 51%. You can also contribute to the Black Swan Life, purchasing your T-shirts and so forth. So, Yedase, we thank you for tuning into the broadcast. And Yebeshia Bio, we will meet again. That's it.